have our concluding panel, and I'm delighted to invite Denva Gallant, who's a new professor in the Department of Art History at Rice University, to welcome our honored guest.
Good afternoon. I hope that you've been fed today. You know, I certainly have. Welcome to our final panel, our present publics, and it is my pleasure to introduce Philippe Sabot. Philippe Sabot is a full professor of philosophy at the University of Lille, president of the Center of Michel Foucault since 2017. His research interests focus on Foucault's thought and his legacy in contemporary philosophy, and also on vulnerability and healthcare issues among older people, a very important topic. He has published Lire les mots et les choses, 2014, Les mêmes et les odeurs, Michel Foucault et les savoirs à l'âge classique, 2015, and contributed to the editions of the works of Michel Foucault in the Bibliothèque de la Pallade, 2015. He recently edited the Phenomenology and Psychology, 2021, and directed a book on Michel Foucault, Discourse and Politics of Identity, 2022. Please welcome me, or join me in welcoming Philippe Sabot. Thank you, Dr. Sabot.
Thank you. I won't apologize. but I would like to thank warmly Nikki for initiating this conference and for a wonderful welcome to Houston and to Rice University. And thank you for all of you, and thank you for the welcome here. And I'd like to dedicate this talk to Daniel Defer, who founded the Center Michel Foucault in 1986. He had already founded an association, AID, in 1984, just after Foucault died. We are also celebrating the 14th anniversary of the birth of this important association. Let me add that Daniel Defer was a specific intellectual, in the sense Judith Revel reminded yesterday, and he was an intellectual who reflected intensely on health and disease at the time of the AIDS epidemic. So in this talk, I will use the frameworks and the tools of Foucault thought to examine the emergence of a sort of biopolitical paradigm of health, a paradigm which implies the correlative transformation of the subject, healthy or sick, into a responsible actor in the healthcare system. Such a paradigm involves reference to normative issues, which refer back to a history of healthcare practices, and within this history, to the relatively recent development of evaluation and standardization process, which in part stem from biopolitical injunction to live in accordance with a certain idea of the healthy. In the mid-1970s, Foucault wrote a series of texts on the emergence and development of a social medicine, médecine sociale, beginning in the 18th century. Based on this text, it is important to point out what role medicine plays in this context and what this role implies from the point of view of healthcare professionals and the institutions in which they work, but also from the point of view of patients and the society or the social body as a whole. The contemporary reconfiguration of health and wellness standards can be traced back to two key dates in the 1940s. The first, in 1942, corresponds to the beverage plan beverage, which was to contribute to the reorganization of health policies in Europe following the Second World War. As Foucault notes, this plan represented a major rearticulation of the relationship between the individual, the state, and health. It is the idea that from now on, it is up to the state to take charge of all health issues relating to the well-being of the population. As a result, I quote Foucault, the terms of the problem are reversed. The concept of the state at the service of the healthy individual replaces the concept of the healthy individual at the service of the state. End of the quote. We are thus witnessing the promotion of a right to a life in good health, the cost of which needs to be evaluated and incorporated into projected state expenditure. Consequently, the medical profession took on an enhanced social function. This social function corresponds to a system of medical intervention that focuses not so much on illnesses and the demands of the ill people, but on health itself, which has become the object of a new political and economic preoccupation that goes far beyond the field and the issue of treating pathologies, and that is extending its regulatory powers to the entire social field. In 1976, Foucault wrote, I quote, that the medicine of recent decades, acting beyond its traditional boundaries, defined by the patient and illnesses, is beginning to have no domain outside itself. And he concluded, we live in open medical states in which medicalization knows no limits. This phenomenon of infinite medicalization, as Foucault wrote, is itself part of a long history that finds another remarkable relay in the development of the classic definition of health by the World Health Organization, adopted in June 1948. This definition apparently sets out something simple and consensual, which is most often associated with a positive concept of health. This definition is the following. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. It should be noted that the context in which it is formulated, this definition is not only a theoretical one. It is first and foremost a practical or normative definition setting out a framework and objectives for health policies. It sets out what should be aimed for and therefore valued and preserved in the perspective of preventive and educational actions promoting health on a population scale. This issue of health promotion, correlative to the right to health proposed by the Beveridge Plan, lies at the heart of the Ottawa Charter adopted in November 1986. In this important text, Ottawa Charter, we find the following idea, I quote, health promotion is the process of enabling people to increase control over and to improve their health, to reach a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. An individual or group must be able to identify and to realize aspirations, to satisfy needs, and to change or cope with the environment. End of the quote. So a new question arises. How does this concept of health promotion support the development of a new relationship between the healthcare system, and its stakeholders or actors. The first thing to point out is that the concept of health has been extended and unified, and it clearly applies to all dimensions of human life. I quote again Ottawa Charter, health promotion is not just the responsibility of the health sector, but goes beyond healthy lifestyle to well-being. The assessment of a healthy life encompasses its physical, psychological, and social aspects. From this point of view, it's a question of considering the human being from the point of view of its well-being and in all the dimensions of this well-being, without exclusivity, but on the contrary, in a holistic way, which means valuing the kind of complementary between the levels of expression and manifestation of well-being. But we need to go further in analyzing the presupposition of the World Health Organization definition. Over and above its positive integrative dimension, this definition also proposes a model of health that sees the individual first and foremost as part of a milieu or environment to which he or she must in some way adapt or even integrate in order to achieve the imperative of full health. Health is not simply a sign of the body internal equilibrium, somehow life in the silence of the organs, as the surgeon René Lerich put it. Rather, it is the balance achieved and maintained between individuals and their milieu, their personal, familial, and social environment. This makes it very difficult to conceive of a truly, totally healthy individual, or at least health always seems to be subject to multiple pathologies, which are no longer based solely on organic or viral causes, but these pathologies can be based on all these areas in which the individuals have to conquer their health. Health is therefore no longer just something about the body that the doctor, the practitioner tries to reach with an appropriate localized treatment. It spills over into those areas of biopsychosocial integration that continuously affect the individual's future and potentially threaten it. While health is a state of complete well-being, everyone is likely to be in an intermediate state, suffering from psychic or psychosomatic disorders, or even experiencing relational difficulties of psychosocial nature that will make them sick, even if they are in good health. This is what the Ottawa Charter clearly notes. By emphasizing the social and personal resources of individuals, as much as their physical capacities, the aim is to broaden the determinants of health and to emphasize that, I quote, health promotion is not just the responsibility of the health sector, but, I add, it involves rather actions carried out in the very broad field of medico-social, which can take charge of all the factors of balance and well-being in the lives of individuals and populations. In this context, some populations identified as being more vulnerable because of their predisposition to develop a particular type of pathologies are the focus of special attention from a whole range of health and social prevention actors, foremost among whom, of course, are medico-social professionals. But it is important to remind that Foucault also emphasized the major role played by the family from the 18th century onwards in this kind of medicalization of society, which takes the form of social control based on hygiene. According to Foucault, as part of the deployment of hygienism, the family was made to play, I quote, the pivotal role between general objectives concerning the good health of the social body and the desire or need for care on the part of individuals. End of quote. So we could almost say a pivotal role for the family between biopolitics and anatomopolitics. And Foucault evokes the medicalizing family. It is his word. Medicalized, insofar as the family is the target of great enterprise of medical acculturation, and medicalizing, insofar as the family circle becomes, I quote Foucault, dense, saturated, permanent, continuous physical environment that envelops, maintains, and promotes the child's body. End of quote. If we come back to the World Health Organization definition, we see that its novelty lies in the fact that the model of health, and therefore of disease, is changing, and with it, the status of the subject concerned. Pathological disorders arise from the interaction and combination of internal and external factors and environments. It is therefore difficult to establish precisely the causes of these disorders and to identify who is sick, since beyond or alongside the patient, there is now a very broad spectrum of human lives whose well-being is incomplete. The multiplication of possible causes of ill-being and illness introduces a dimension of risk, the various factors of which can be and must be analyzed. But the aim of this analysis is not so much to refine the etiology of a pathology as to statistically substantiate its probability in order to prevent its disadvantage, whether in terms of health or in terms of economy. That means in terms of cost to society as a whole, society which is involved in the deployment of social insurance mechanism. The notion of risk is therefore fundamentally aimed at the healthy, and implies that health is seen as the horizon of an indefinite struggle against risk factors linked with certain individual and social behaviors. For example, well known, tobacco consumption increases the risk of contracting lung cancer, or alcohol consumption can have a measurable impact on the development of domestic violence, or conversely, failure to comply with social medical recommendations such as vaccination against COVID-19 represent an aggravating factor in the case of coronavirus infection. As you can see from these examples, the consideration of risk in health policies draws a continuous and reversible line from the individual to the global population. Indeed, if risk is calculated on the scale of the population, of which the individual is only one element, the latter, the individual, remains the bearer of a fraction of this risk or these risks. It thus appears that the World Health Organization definition of health, which is in itself very positive, in fact profoundly renews the concept of health and medicine. Medicine is asserting itself as the social medicine of health rather than the clinical medicine of disease. And consequently, the extension of medical power to the whole of society and to every dimension of each individual existence, has resulted in the requalification of not only the suffering patient, but also the healthy individual. Individuals as to be actors and promoters of their own health, and through it, of a collective health to which everyone is accountable if one hopes to benefit in turn. Medicine has thus arrogated to itself the right not only to treat ill people and their illnesses, but also to regulate the public arena of health by defining standards of behavior and pathologizing deviations from these standards. This is the ambiguity of the notion of public health, which amounts to defining on the collective scale of a population technical and regulatory measures designed to clean up society by improving individual behavior. That means by encouraging individuals to prevent the risk of disease and to adopt appropriate, responsible behavior, particularly with regard to the allocation of resources to the healthcare system. In a book, in a French book entitled La Grande Santé, Olivier Razac notes that, I quote, while it is logical to evaluate the efficiency of a healthcare system in terms of the relationship between the health of the population and the cost of the system, the problem is that no behavior, no escapes health management. We can consider that the healthcare system produces health, provided we don't forget that this health is above all a normative integration into the social system. And he had, if integration into the healthcare system and integration in general tend to overlap, then exclusion from healthcare services leads to social exclusion through physical and mental precarity. End of the quote. So this interplay of health and social integration or exclusion brings us close to the ultimate meaning of biopolitics, to make live and let die. The right to health, that it is implied in the World Health Organization, a positive definition, is in any case accompanied by a duty of responsibility on everyone's part in the face of the possibility of disease. In France, the Public Healthcare Code, le Code de la Santé Publique, is clear on this aspect of prevention. The aim is, I quote, to improve the state of health of the population by encouraging individual or collective behaviors that can help reduce the risk of disease. End of the. Promoting and preserving health becomes almost a social and moral imperative involving the responsibility of each and every individual to observe standardized behaviors identified according to their conformity to the healthy imperative. From this perspective, an individual's poor state of health will easily be as a consequence of culpable irresponsibility in the face of something avoidable, that is in the face of identified and well-known risks. And this carelessness, culpable carelessness, will be all the more blameworthy in that it not only concerns the private sphere of the singular person who has failed to preserve his or her health by complying with the health imperative, but it also translates into collective costs, both direct costs, hospital care and social security coverage of health expenses, and indirect costs, like the socio-economic cost of reduced productivity if risky behavior keeps an individual away from work, either temporarily or permanently. Everyone is therefore also accountable as a consumer of cure or healthcare institutions, engaged in a market in which one is obliged to invest part of one's human capital to benefit in return from the services offered by the healthcare system. I could end there, but I won't end there. This would be tantamount to arguing that the government of the living, ill or healthy, leads to the development of a sanitary culture or even of a cult of the healthy, which decides who are good and bad subjects, who deserve to be cared for, and who should be abandoned to disease and death. However, this would be to overlook an essential point inherent in Foucault's reflection on power as the action of a freedom upon a freedom. I mean, basically, the reflection of Foucault on the reversibility of power relations and the leverage that subjects themselves can find in them to think and act differently from what is expected of them. In other words, it would be a mistake to conclude that the way the healthcare system is structured today and the role expected of its various stakeholders, individual or institutional stakeholders, implies the passivity or impotence of these actors, reduced to the rank of mere effects of the system and rendered incapable of influencing its organization and prescriptions. As Daniel Defer has rightly pointed out, based on his experience of aide, l'association aide, and also in an important text entitled Le Malade, un nouveau réformateur social, the infinite empowerment of the subject as an actor in the healthcare system also gives rise to demands and struggles emanating from these actors themselves, insofar as they see themselves as users of the healthcare system, inscribing their demands and struggles within the system itself, so as not to be so much governed by it, pas être trop gouverné par ce système. In the field of health, these demands and struggles, led today, for example, by patients' associations, can be traced back to the overhaul of healthcare systems initiated by the Beveridge Plan in 1942. In the 1976 text of Foucault, quoted earlier, Foucault stresses that the introduction of a right to a healthy life does not immediately fall back on the sort of hygienist duty to ensure one's own health through the proper management of living environments and adaptive behaviors. He thus responds in this text to Ivan Illich and his medical nemesis, published the year before. In this book, Medical Nemesis, Illich diagnosed the expropriation of health, l'expropriation de la santé, by modern medicine, stigmatized the negation of individuals by the collective system, and he called on everyone to take control of their own health, what Foucault ironically described as a paramedical bucolism. In a way, Illich could subscribe to a sort of repressive hypothesis based on the opposition between individuals who take charge of their own destiny, and a medicine whose danger lies in ignoring them. However, if Foucault intends to assert the voice of those exposed to medicine or medical care, it is not by artificially opposing free self-determination and unilateral submission to medical power, nor by arguing that users have suddenly and inexplicably risen up against this power. So neither medicine nor anti-medicine, ni anti-medicine, but rather, perhaps, a renewed focus on the conditions under which public actions or collectives of patients, can form and seek to make themselves heard by public authorities. So it is a question of inventing new modes of political subjectivation that respond to the healthcare system, that address it, and basically propose to turn its own health injunction on their head for the benefit of its users themselves. The right to health thus becomes, positively and perhaps paradoxically, a right to be sick against any hygienist temptation, and by securing this right in the world of work, for example, and it becomes also a right not to be sick by demanding that public authorities implement prevention policies that protect the most vulnerable living beings, as in the case of AIDS in the early 80s, or more recently, vaccination policies against COVID-19. So this is my conclusion. The claim for a bottom-up repoliticization of the healthcare system could be underpinned by the words of Georges Canguilhem, quoted by Daniel Defer himself in one of his texts. It is Canguilhem speaking, it is absurd to speak of public health. It is disease that is public. End of quote. So disease is public. This means that sick people are not in default with regard to the prevention imperatives of public health, but that by once again becoming visible in the public arena, they could claim to be their promoters based on the recognition of their specific needs and expectations in terms of vitality and normativity. To say it in a conclusive word, sick lives matter. Thank you.